Hi there. How is everyone today? We're off to a very slow start.
Yeah, good evening, everybody.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Good
Good
evening,
evening.
brothers. Good
Yes,
evening.
Yeah,
beautiful to have you with
yeah.
us this evening.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's not about always the big crowd. It's gonna make it a little bit more personal and give you a chance to, especially during the first part, ask questions as we go along. If you have any queries, that is. But yeah, we are going to be talking about the legs. We're going to be going through the anatomy and we're going to go through some of the alchemical processes, some of the metaphysics associated with the legs. Um, the legs being very important, symbolically and physically. The legs being the pillar that we stand on, the legs guiding our movements, the legs having to be strong. There's that saying, skipping leg days. Yeah, you don't want to skip leg days. If anything, it's more important to have the strong legs than it is to have a strong upper limb. By having strong legs, you're gonna, enable yourself to strengthen your upper limbs and your upper body efficiently. Um, so yeah, we associate the legs with many different things. Movement, symbolically, physically, we associate the legs with standing our ground. We associate the legs even when we're talking about standing on the shoulders of giants. In order to stand, we must have firm legs to stand on, and also for us to stand on them, they must have a strong legs to stand on. When we're looking at the legs, we're looking at the roots being rooted, rooted within the ground. So the legs are so important on so many aspects. But a lot of the times we do not understand or understand the makeup of our legs. And sometimes the more we understand something, the more we appreciate it. And we usually, our first point of understanding about the legs or any part of the body is when they fail us. Yeah, but we don't want to get to the point where our body starts to fail us and then understand it. We want to understand our body now. And then when it comes to the point where they begin to try and play up, we already know what's going on and we can already tackle the problem. Yeah. So I'm going to start off and just give a general overview. I will be spending a lot of the time on the anatomy app. And we're just going to go through the body. For the first part, especially, feel free to ask questions as I go along. All right, so I am going to share my screen. And if you have any problems seeing my screen, please do let me know. All right, so here is a nice image of our skeleton. Yeah. So when we're looking at the lower limbs, we are essentially looking at our leg, lower limbs, leg, same thing. So we have our leg, and then sometimes people might refer to the lower leg as the bottom half. So that's anything from what we call this bone being the tibia or where the knee joint is, dividing our leg from our lower leg. Yeah. But a lot of these words are interchangeable. And unless someone specifically says a certain part of our leg, sometimes we're just thinking of the whole leg system. Yeah. So when people come to me with pain, they're a little bit more specific. They might say, "Oh, I've got a problem in my leg," and then I'm saying, "What part of your leg are we talking about?" Because the leg is, you know, as we can see, you know, half of the length of our body. And for some people, it's a little bit more than half. For other people, it might be less depending on our body type. But generally, our legs are the longest part of our body. And as we see with the structures that make up our leg, we'll see that we've got the longest nerve in our leg. the big muscles, the biggest muscles are in our legs. Yeah. So let's have a look. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at our bones, and I'm going to talk through the bones, look at some of the common injuries that we might find. Then I'm going to just go over the nerve of our legs, and then lastly, go over the muscles of the legs before handing it over to Sahu and for his discussion, but from the flip side, looking at the metaphysical angle. All right, so let us begin. And if anyone has any questions about the legs, you can write it down, ask me at the end. Or if I'm talking about the part that your problem is, you can just let me know. So here we've got our femur, and our femur is the longest bone in our body. So when we're looking at the femur, we're looking at the joint, we can see that the femur is part of our hip joint, and this is a ball and socket joint. So it being a ball and socket joint, it allows it very similar to the shoulder. I don't know if any of you was on our shoulder lecture or webinar. And as you can see, the shoulder is also a ball and socket joint. And with these ball and socket joints, what it allows such a wide degree of movement. And as we can see, we need our legs for running, we need it for jumping, for squatting, for walking, walking up hills, walking backwards. So we need it for so many things. And we can see that it's been made and designed in a very versatile way. The main difference between the two joints is we've got stronger muscles and we've got a lot more things going on around the hips, and that is just to help secure it a little bit better. Yeah. So what we've got here, we've got other things that kind of, which I'm going to add here just to show you. But we've got things like the capsule of the hips. And if I'm going to just fade it a little bit, just to give you kind of a perspective. And as you can see, that capsule is making that hip joint a little bit more secure. Yeah. We've also got a whole wide range of other muscles. This is what we call the greater trochanter. And even if we, when we're standing, we can just place our hands on that bony part, and that is the greater trochanter. And that greater trochanter, it's basically a point where a lot of muscles of the hip, of the pelvis attach. All right. So that's all one side of the hip. And sometimes we can get deformities that happen over years of wear and tear. And this wear and tear will cause things like arthritis of the hip. So osteoarthritis we're talking about. And that can make the joint very, very painful. That can make people find it very difficult to walk, etc. And often when people are above a certain age group, then they might need a hip replacement. A big problem in the elderly population is when we're looking at this part, which is a greater trochanter, we can see the ball and socket. That little bit here is known as the neck, and that's the neck of the femur. And oftentimes when older people fall, because of the low mineral density of the bone, which occurs with aging, especially after things like menopause, that increases the risk of that breaking. And, that can be very dangerous because if that breaks and, it's not detected in time, what happens is that can affect the whole blood supply of the bone. And, that becomes very necrotic and, at risk of further damage and further problems. So it's never a good thing. If an older person falls, it's always a good, especially above a certain age group, it's always very, very important that they get an X-ray just to make sure there's no damage, no further necrosis, and further complications along the line. So that can be something, very, very serious. Okay, so when we look at the other side now, just zooming in and zooming out just to get that perfect angle. Yeah, we can see that it changes from a ball and socket joint to more of a hinge joint. And with that hinge joint and the design of the whole joint, it only allows movement in one plane. So where the hip and the shoulder can move in multiple planes, that knee joint is only moving in one plane, which, from a physiotherapy point of view, it makes life a little bit more simple. But again, we never look at the body in isolation. When we're looking at it holistically, we can see that problems of the other joints, such as the hip and such as the ankle, can affect the knee. So another common problem within the knee as well as the hip is again osteoarthritis, and again it's the wear and tear of all the lining of the bone, which can is very dependent on things like obesity, um, being overweight, playing a lot of sports such as football. It increases the risk of wear and tear, and that basically damages the surface and the synovial lining of the joint, which then will cause inflammation, pain. Further down the line, if unchecked, it will lead to bone spurs and parts of the bones kind of becoming very rough, and that also can result in quite a bit of pain. When we're looking at the knee as well, we can see that we've got this ACL. And when we're looking at the ACL is basically stopping that movement, that translation of the femur and the tibia. So it basically is stopping the femur from sliding forward off the tibia. When we're looking at things like sports, where people plant their foot in the ground and make twisting motions, that can actually compromise the ACL. And that's where people will get ACL ruptures, etc., which is very, very common in sports, very common in sports such as football, very common in sports such as basketball, etc. Yeah. And just to give you a better idea, actually, if I fade all the other muscles, yeah, can you see? Oh, let me go to the side. So you can see it's attached to part of the femur and the tibia bone, and that will stop it sliding further backwards. As you can see, if you was to stretch that more, it will create more tension, which will help support. But again, any structure in the body can exceed the tension and rupture if we're not careful. And that's why keeping the knee strong holistically, working on things like the balance, working on things like all the other muscles working well, working on the flexibility holistically, that can help prevent some of these injuries. All right, so let's go onto the bone below. So here is this is the tibia, also known as the shin bone. And then we've got another bone on the side, which is our fibula bone, yeah? And these bones, when we look at the ankle, they make up both sides of our ankle. So the nodular part on the outside of our ankle is part of the fibula bone, and the nodular part on the inside of our ankle is from the tibia bone. And then right at the bottom here, just underneath supporting that bone, we've got the talus, and then we've got another bone, which is our heel bone, which is also known as the calcaneus. And here is where our Achilles tendon attach. So I'll just quickly add the muscle just so you can have a representation. But can you see all the Achilles tendon attaching This is a American software, so they name things a little bit different. Calcaneal tendon. In the UK, we call it Achilles tendon, but calcaneal tendon is just meaning the tendon of the calcaneus. Yeah. But here, where it's fixed on this part, you can get different types of Achilles tendon pain. You get one happening right at the insertion, one happening a little bit above. The one that happens here is definitely a little bit worse. So this is the one you do not want, but the one that happens what we call mid portion of the Achilles tendon, this is it's not great to have, but it's a better version of the problem. Yeah. Okay, so let me hide that. Yeah, so, and in here, we've basically got our navicular bone, and that's on the inside. We can actually feel that on the inside, that noduly part. Then we've got our cuboid and all the cuneiform bones. We got medial, the middle one or intermediate, and then the more lateral one. Anything medial means middle, anything lateral means on the outside. And then we've got our metatarsals. So in the football world, we hear of footballers fracturing their metatarsals. And then we've got phalanges of our feet, and then distal phalanges, proximal meaning closer to the body, distal meaning further away. So we've got all these different bones in the body. Now, when we're looking also at the ankle bones are associated with sprains. And with sprains mean that it's to do with the ligaments. If you hear of strain, which is STRAIN, that's to do with the muscle fibers straining. Sprains, which is SPRAIN, hopefully I spelled it right. That's to do with sprain, that's to do always with the ligaments. Yeah. And then on the inside, we have, I'm just seeing if we can show up here. Yeah, we have a lot of our deltoid ligaments on the inside of our ankle. And these are what connects the bones together just to create all that structure. But usually, if we had to look at sprains of the ankle, we will see that we sprain the lateral side a little bit more. So we've got different ligaments on the outside. And I mean, this is what we call the ATFL ligament. This is a very, very common ligament that we will sprain. A lot of the times, on a practical level, even feeling people's ankles palpating the area who do a lot of sports, whether it's badminton, whether it's football, tend to get a lot of tightening of the ligaments, the tendons, and the fascia in that area. And a lot of people gain good relief through things like massage, acupuncture, a little bit of instrument-assisted soft tissue massage, which is where we would use devices such as this, just to get into the muscles and loosen them up. And what we can see here, just going further down, we can see even just by looking at all these bones and the navicular bone, etc., usually these bones help to form a medial arch of the foot. So that's why when we're standing, we can feel a little bit of space in between these arches. What tends to happen is generally Afro-Caribbean, that population, we tend to have flatter foot, and our arches are said to be more collapsed. I don't like the word collapsed because collapsed I would only use more in the sense of there being a problem. So I would definitely say we have more flatter arches, and some would say because of the terrain, even now in Africa, you get more people who are, walking on barefoot and even running on their barefoot. And, in various studies, they show actually that when you're looking at the Kenyans, they use the whole of the foot when they're running, which helps to push them off in the forward direction. Whereas, people in the Western countries, because we're all wearing trainers, we tend to heel strike. And then in the striking of the heel, it kind of pushes us a little bit back as we're running. Whereas Kenyans and Ethiopians who have walked barefoot, from their younger days, tend to be more flat-footed, absorb more of the ground, and kind of push up. So yeah, that is general bones, a little bit of ligaments. Oh, ligaments we didn't talk about. Um, so we got ligaments on the inside of our knee as well, and all the ligaments. So we've got like our medial and our lateral collateral ligaments, and they basically stop our knee from shifting sideways. Yeah, because if we can see, uh, without any ligaments, we will see that the bones will be able just to slide off each other. But it's what we call the anterior cruciate ligament, the posterior cruciate ligament, which stop them sliding forward and backwards. But we've also got other ligaments like the medial collateral ligaments on the inside, and then the lateral collateral ligaments, which help to stop it shifting sideways. And often what we can see is depending on osteoarthritis as well, is where we can see people whose legs start to kind of go in a valgus direction. So valgus, if you follow my cursor, if you can see it, valgus will mean it's more knocking inwards. So the knees are knocking. Sometimes even because the body tells a language, even people who are like sexually assaulted, they will tend to develop valgus knees because the subconscious always protects in that area. And again, you see people with more bowed legs, So when you see any extreme bowing or any extreme valgus formation, we know that the ligaments are more laxed, which means a little bit loose on one side and even a little bit tighter on the other side. Okay, so let us go briefly into looking at the nerve. Anatomy is one of the things we can just get lost in. There's so much to know, there's so much we don't know, so much to learn. It's never ending. This is just one small system. Well, not small system, but it's only one system of many in the body. We're just talking about the musculoskeletal system, but there is so many systems and so many different specialists just to even educate us on these different systems. But knowing the system enough to use the knowledge and improve one's longevity is very important. So one of the longest nerves in our body and one of the biggest nerves in our body is the sciatic nerve. And it's so big because it has to supply big muscle. So the sciatic nerve runs all the way on the back of the legs. And this nerve, it supplies the hamstrings. So we can see the hamstrings here. There are three of them, 1, 2, and then 3. It also supplies part of the adductor muscles, which you can see is that big muscle, and it supplies a portion of that one. Not the whole of it, but a portion. Also, so yeah, with that, when we think of nerves, just think of them as kind of pathways where there's an electrical activity, which when the nerve meets the muscles at a neuromuscular junction, there's an action potential, which is like energetic potential, which helps to contract the muscle. And that's why, we can stimulate these muscles, one by conscious thought, but we can also stimulate these muscles by getting electrical devices such as EMS, electric, elect, basically where we're adding pads and stuff like that, sticking over the muscles. They will send the current, and that current will cause the muscles to contract. And it's very good for people who are struggling to contract the muscles on their own. Um, if I take away some of that now. So, right. So here also we can see that the sciatic nerve, it does branch off. So the sciatic nerve, one of the branches is the tibial nerve, and basically the tibial nerve is supplying the whole back of our leg, and that will do things like make us point our toe downwards, which is called plantar flexion. So that basically, if you're doing stuff, something like a heel raise, and it will also help us to flex our toes. Yeah. And as you can see, it makes sense because the reason it makes sense is when we look at the muscles which are close to that nerve, we will see our soleus muscle, and then we will also see our gastrocnemius muscle. And these muscles basically help us bend our toes down, but then we'll also see some of the other muscles, some of our toe flexors and stuff like that, which also will flex. Yeah, and they're coming at the bottom of our feet there. We've also got another branch, uh, and that's a common perineal nerve. And then what we have with that common perineal nerve, again, this is American software. So fibula is the same thing. And that nerve goes on the outside. And it also supplies the front part of our leg. And when we look at what's on the front of our leg, we've got something called the tibialis anterior. And that tibialis anterior will help us bring our toes, our ankle upwards. And then we've also got all these other flexors, toe flexors, sorry, not toe flexors, toe extensors, because on this side it's actually helping to extend our toes upwards. Because the nerve supplies the front part and the side part, it will extend our toes, it will help us flex our ankle. And on the side where we've got these perineal muscles, also called fibularis, it also helps to evert the foot. Yeah. Another nerve we have at the front is our femoral nerve. Oh, turn that back on. And again, the femoral nerve is supplying the front part of our muscles. And what's at the front of our muscles? What muscles are at the front of our leg? Sorry, it's the time of day. Been up since early, let's just say that. We've got our quadricep muscles, yeah, and there are four of them, which we'll go in them in a little bit more detail. Yeah. So we've got all these all these electrical activities which causing different muscles to contract. Now, okay, since we're talking about nerve, one of the problems that happens, especially with the sciatic nerve, which is here, is sometimes sitting on the toilet for too long, we get the tingling in our leg, is because we have to look at where our sitting muscles are. Not our sitting muscle, sorry, our sitting bone. Our sitting bone is known as the ischium. And as you can see, if I take away all the confusion that's there, just to make it a little bit more clearer, we can see from that point, these are our sitting bones. Now, when we look at our sitting bones, and then we're looking at the sciatic nerve, we can see that they're very, very close. So one that is sitting on the toilet for too long, you can see why one will get tingling down the leg, because basically you're blocking the blood supply, and now we're getting that tingling sensation, because every part of our body needs a good blood supply. Any part of your body where you totally cut off the blood supply, that part is going to die. Obviously, that's not going to happen in that extreme way if we're just sitting on the toilet. If we was tied to the toilet for indefinitely, that's a different story. But I hope that's not the case. Um, so yeah, that's what can cause a little bit of tingling. But more so, when we hear of things like sciatica, we can get sciatica happening from the back, but because we're talking about the leg, we're going to talk about sciatica happening as a result of a muscle becoming strained or tight. And that muscle we're referring to is the piriformis muscle. And as you can see, this is where our piriformis muscle is. And in some of the population, that sciatic nerve is running below that muscle. There's some population where that nerve is running above that muscle. And then there's a portion of the population where that nerve is running through the muscle. And I'm certain from the research that it's a little bit higher, people with sciatica, or correctly termed piriformis syndrome, where the sciatic muscle, the piriformis muscle, is either too tight and is impinging on the sciatic nerve, or if the nerve is going through the muscle and that muscle's tighter, that can cause symptom of numbness, etc., down the legs. And oftentimes when people come and see me and I release the area, either through things like deep pressure massage, stretching, things like acupuncture, once that's released, sometimes, instantaneously, they will feel a lot better. Yeah. So just gonna leave that in regards to the nerve. So we went through a few different nerves there. Now, yeah, let's just briefly talk about the muscles. So the muscles of the legs. So let's start off with the quads. So the quad means four. Um, so when we're looking at the quadricep muscles, known as the quads, we're referring to four muscles. So what we've got here, this is my favorite muscle. And it's my favorite muscle because I always talk about this muscle and always bring people's attention to this muscle. And vastus medialis oblique, also, it looks like a teardrop. So some people describe it as a teardrop muscle, just for description or descriptive purposes. Now, what's really interesting about the muscle is a lot of the time when we see people with knee problems or the whole biomechanics of the knee is not quite right, and we want to control the level and the rate of the extension. So if this is the femur, this is the tibia, we're talking about extension. When we want to control that rate, the VMO is very important. And what tends to happen is all these other muscles of the quads. So here we got the vastus intermedialis and the vastus lateralis. A lot of the time, because of the IT band, which I'm going to put here, where's the IT band? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so the IT band is a band. Maybe if I add more muscles, it will show up. Yeah. So there it is. So the IT band is very, very tight, and it has to be tight because it's practically separating the quads from the hamstring. Um, because that's made to be tight, these other muscles, the vastus lateralis, tends to become more tighter, and often it causes the patella which is the knee bone or the kneecap, to go over to the outside. Whereas when we strengthen up that VMO muscle, it actually helps to maintain the equilibrium of the muscles. We got our rectus femoris muscle, and that's the quad muscle, which is on top of the other muscles. So if I remove one layer, we will see that we've got the three quads, and now we've got the fourth quad there. Yeah. And with that muscle, that's the muscle that crosses the hip and the knee. So whereas these other three muscles underneath, they only extend the knee. The rectus femoris muscle also helps us to bend our knee up, flex at the hip, which is basically this movement. Right. On the other side, we've got our hamstring muscles, and the hamstring muscles were nicknamed the hamstring muscles to do with pork. And basically, I don't know what year or what hundreds of years ago it was. I mean, me being a vegan, I'm not too sure if they still do it. I'm guessing they do it, but it's called the hamstrings because that's the part where butchers would hang up pork by the hamstrings. Yeah, so it's called hamstrings for that reason. They're not its Latin names because the Latin names are very different. So with the Latin names, we got the membranosus, tendinosus. So we've got them on the inside here, and then we've got the one underneath it, and then we've got my favorite muscle of the hamstring. For some reason, I have favorite muscles in different parts of the body. But my favorite one is the biceps femoris. It's one that tends to get tight a lot and one that attaches on the outside of the knee bone here, which is the head of the fibula, that whole knee area. And with the IT band, which I'm going to add here, with the IT band, they cause a lot of problems in the knee. And sometimes, because everything's connected, as Sahu will go through in brief detail, everything's connected by the fascia. You know, if you have a problem here, it can extend to other areas. Yeah. And what we see is that whole lateral line. Generally, when we're talking about the leg, a big problem can be that whole lateral line, which is on all the outside, the IT band, the biceps femoris muscle, the vastus lateralis, and the tibialis interior muscle, which we haven't spoke about yet. That whole side can become tight, and sometimes just by releasing one section helps to release other sections. So, you know, as a physio, I tend to try and treat all these things holistically, which brings the greatest amount of relief. Yeah, so then we've got our gastrocnemius muscle. We've got the medial head, which is inside, medial, and then our lateral head. And again, it's connected with our Achilles tendon. And then underneath that, we also have the soleus muscle, which is more of the slower twitch fiber. So the gastrocnemius muscle, they're more explosive. They will help us jump, sprint, run, etc. While the soleus is more slow twitch. It will help us more for endurance stuff, even just standing and stuff like that. But both of these, everything converges, the gastrocnemius, the soleus, and they all make up what we know as our Achilles tendon, which inserts, as I showed you before, right at the back of the leg, the heel bone. Yeah. Right. And then people get things like they can even get tendonitis, where the constant inflammation and the failed recovery of the tendon, or that sometimes, you know, people can get a full rupture. And it tends to be very common in men who are very sporty around their 40s. Reasons for that is definitely because of not just the body aging, but sometimes when we do the wrong things or eat the wrong thing for a period of time or overuse the body without the right balance of um, nutrition, minerals, things, the whole nutritional value, things that will build up the body, it can make people more at risk. Whereas, sometimes when we're looking at people in the indigenous parts of the world, we can see that they're able to do certain things for much longer. And again, that might be our footwear, might be something, we're not doing quite right, where they've got sunlight, good levels of vitamin D, good food, and just a whole different approach to life. And at the front, as we say, we've got the tibialis anterior muscle. And yeah, that muscle helps to um, basically bring our ankles up, and it also helps to rotate our ankles. Yeah, then we've got all the other smaller muscles at the front, which helps to extend our toes, and some of the smaller muscles at the back, which helps to flex our toes. Yeah, so I don't want to go into too much detail, but we've got also our reductors, which are on. I'm just gonna isolate this one because this is the largest muscle, largest adductor. Um, where is it? There is. I'm just gonna remove some layers. Right, and isolate. Yeah, and that's the adductor magnus muscle. And all the adductors bring our help us bring our legs inwards. Yeah. Its opposites are the abductors, which are more at the hip level. And one of my favorite muscles of the abductors is the gluteus medius muscle, which I'm going to add. Yeah, so this muscle here, which fills in the outside of our pelvis and goes into the greater trochanter. And that muscle is very, very important for abduction, bringing our leg outwards, but also very good for that whole stability. So sometimes when people are running and their hips are going inwards too much, that muscle can help just to form that, that nice structure as we're running, which will help to prevent us from making our knees go inwards too much, which can create some problems. So I work a lot with that muscles to help people run better, improve their performance, etc. Okay. So yeah, I think I've gone through, yeah, good general overview, bones, muscles, nerves, and some injuries. Yeah. Any questions at all?
Yes, thank you, Christos. That was that was a general breakdown of what's going on in the lower limb, but I would still say there was a lot of information going on there. As you said, there's a lot going through the bones, going through the ligaments,
Mm.
then touching upon the muscles, yeah, the nerves. Man, yeah, it's a lot of stuff going on. And
Yeah.
then really, because of the way you described the various injuries and everything and their connections to the structure,
Mhm.
a lot of this ties into what I'm going to be talking about as well. The connection between these things, why
Oh,
these emotions are connected to that space there.
okay, well, perfect. Well, I've just set the scene then.
Yeah, really. But that was a good breakdown, Christos. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions? or you can write them down, save them to the end. There will be plenty of opportunity.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Oh, no, no problem at all. Please.
Okay, yes, it was a lot of information, but very useful information for me. You talked or you touched briefly on some of the things that you can do to help strengthen these muscles, particularly in the legs and so on.
Mhm.
Is there anything, or does that apply, for example, when you're having losing muscle mass? Would
Mm.
those exercises also work to help you build back that muscle mass in the legs?
Yes, no, definitely. You've heard of the principle, if you don't use it, you lose it. And what research shows is when we reach a certain age, the muscle density starts to diminish over time. What we find is that people who are the best way to exercise is to be very functional in your approach. So there's a program at the moment and it's called The Blue Zone. It's on Netflix and it's going around the world and looking at the people who live the longest. And what I mean by being functional in our approach is, we have the generic exercises or what we know here in the Western world of what exercises to be. We think of it as going to the gym. We think of it as running on the treadmill, running in the park, and doing these various things. Where it was looking at a group in Japan, and they were not in mainland Japan. They were like on I think it Owasaki Islands. And the things that the lifestyle they live, and we can see this in the Caribbean, Africa, indigenous parts of the world, some places in India, etc. But it was actually their lifestyle that was their exercise. For example, the group in Japan, they didn't have any furniture. They didn't have so much furniture. So by not having so much furniture, you had these 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds who were basically sitting on the floor or something very low. Now, because they were sitting on the floor somewhere very low, they had to do a deep squat every time they got up.
Yeah.
So that's like 10 times, 10, 20 deep squats in one day, which we might try and program into 1 hour once a week.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. But suppose now you are functional, you do exercise regularly, etc., but you have a condition or something that is contributing to the loss of muscle mass.
mm,
With doing exercise, or what type of different exercise, if there are any?
mm.
No, what I'm trying to ask is, will the exercises, despite the condition, would the exercises help you to retain that muscle mass?
Oh, definitely. One of the things that highlighted it, even from a strong evidence point of view, is during the COVID period. So where I see a lot of people with like neurological conditions or a lot of the elderly population, what was happening with COVID, where they was more active, more mobile, before COVID, just a period of being locked in their homes and stuff like that, or where they didn't have the access to physio or going to the gym and stuff like that, you could see a big, big decline in their strength, their function, and everything. So a lot of the times we think that just by doing simple things, we think of exercise as always it has to make us stronger. But there gets to a point where exercise is actually more important to help us maintain our function as well.
Yeah.
And we can see that people who stop doing exercise or stop being active, they lose, a lot of muscle mass. In terms of people who's got neurological conditions, they can find actually that they may good improvements with exercise, you know. So exercise and doing the correct exercises will help. When you're doing exercise, you always want to do it in a way which is very productive and very, it should challenge one generally. So if we're doing things that are too easy, that we're already used to, then sometimes we don't make any changes. We just maintain at that level. But where we can, when we make slight improvements, so for example, if let's say you're doing a squat with no weight, maybe even just holding something like 5 kilograms or, and doing a squat, you know, that's more load. So we're loading our body more. And as a result of loading our body more, our body's responding in a way where it's talking to the muscles. So we load the body, we get a lot of mechanical stimulation, and that mechanical stimulation leads to chemical changes within the body, which helps to build up the strength of our muscles. So exercise is important for everyone. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how what condition you have. Well, it doesn't matter what condition you have, but most
Move.
conditions from a physiotherapy point of view is, you know, we can prescribe exercise for various things. And now the difference might be a personal trainer prescribing it to the general population or a specialist physiotherapist in the area prescribing it to a neuro patient. But exercise will help to strengthen the muscles. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Christos. Very insightful. Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah.
Hi, hi, Christos. Yeah, hi, Sahu. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, really good presentation. Beverly's question that she asked there.
Mhm.
I've heard that with it as you grow older, you lose muscle mass, as you said. Yeah, but isn't it that you have to do resistance uh,
Yeah.
exercises to build back that or to help maintain that, which is
Yeah.
weight. Yeah,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's different types of exercise. So resistance training is one of the best, you know, forms of training that will help you put on muscle mass. Um, but when we're looking at resistance training, we do always have to use weights to be at the resistance. So for example, we can use water as resistance. So for example, you know, swimming is one of the best exercises for our core. And me not being the best swimmer in the world, doing swimming personally, I get a good activation of muscles that I wouldn't usually activate whilst I'm on land. You know, we can use wind can be our resistance. Walking up hills or running up the hill can be resistance. Walking with a weighted vest can be a resistance. Our own body, if we're doing pull-ups, our own body can be a resistance. You know, so there's you can use many different things as resistance. The best thing about weights, it allows us to measure and progress our resistance in a very systematic way. You know, if we're going outside and we're using wind as resistance, we have to wait for it to be a very windy day. And we can't always measure that correctly. You know, we might have to just find bigger hills to run up, you know, which might be a little bit too far. We might have to go to the Peak District or somewhere in Wales, Snowdon, you know, to get that resistance. But weights allow us to measure the resistance in a very nice way. Even that's why treadmills can be helpful, because treadmills also help us to measure the resistance in a very systematic way. You can put the incline and measure the angle, and then you can time how long you've done the run for. Yeah. In Africa, where some of the bodybuilders there, their work is a resistance. Some of the farmers, looking so ripped. The strongest old elderly people I've met in this country have all been farmers, and they've been people working on allotment. Some of them, and you could tell by the handshake. And I'm like, you're 90 years old, and I need my hands for my work, and you're squeezing the life out of it. And it's just much stronger than a 20 or 30-year-old's handshake of this modern day, anyway.
Over time.
Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, great, thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Many different types of resistance. That's
Mhm.
true. We're going to touch a bit of that in a few moments as well. The type of resistance we can apply.
Yeah. All right, we'll get into your presentation, Sahu, and then
I think there was one more question about plantar fascia.
was there one more? Ah. Oh, I was diagnosed with plantar fasciitis. The insoles did not work, neither the injection. I am still in pain. So, with plantar fasciitis, that's basically where you've got inflammation of a thick band called basically the
Plantar fascia.
plantar fascia. I'm just trying to get you a visual representation.
I always
And
think that's one of the more straightforward things to resolve.
they can be, but our whole
Ice,
lifestyle does not
ice,
support it.
ice and a good spiky ball.
Yeah,
Ice and a spiky ball. There's not much other options going on here.
all right. So, oh, am I sharing my screen still?
No, go and share your screen.
Where are we at? Share.
But you do need a soft one to start with, though, to penetrate into the connective tissue, into that fascia there.
Yeah, can you see there? All that plantar fascia. So basically, it's just inflammation of that where we've overstrained it. So the plantar fascia helps to make up our arch. See, there's no other. I thought there would be a video on that one. But basically, it helps to form our arch. It helps with the whole integrity. Now, with the methods, let's see, I think you said you had an injection, and what was the other thing? I can't see it anymore.
Yeah, no,
What,
it never worked. Yeah,
the
it never
injection
worked.
didn't work, and what else didn't work? Was there one more thing that didn't work?
I don't think there was one more thing there.
Okay. Oh, the insoles. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. So with them not working, there's still other options. Sometimes you might have to look a little bit wider. You might have to look at actually what are you wearing? I know you've been given insoles, um, but what led to the problem? Is it that you're standing on your feet all day? Is it that you're wearing sandals a lot? Is it because you've got weakness on one side? Is it that you're weight bearing more on one side? Have you got problems in one hip? So there's so many different angles. It's no sandals.
You
And
know
had
those
had
shoes? You know those shoes that create a negative heel where you don't end up going backwards? And it's like they create like a rocking action.
yeah. They look like the Sketcher ones, but
Sketchers do a design as well. There's a few companies that do this design, but
New
they're really
Balance
good.
New Balance have started to do that as well.
The
And New
negative heel
Balance,
technology.
yeah, they look like that type of rockers type of
When you
thing.
stand up, it's like you find your center point and balance, but you get a chance to actually strengthen this fascia as well. this plantar
Okay,
fascia, and you stretch it because you're moving through the range. When you stand, you're forced not to go on your back heel and
I
stay
see.
center. So you're always like stabilizing yourself. They're interesting shoes.
And Dawn's answer, no sandal, yes, problems in the hips. Uh, is a plantar fasciitis in both feet? Another question will be, have you got a lot of tightness in your calf muscles? Have you got a lot of tightness in your Achilles tendons? Have you tried hands-on treatment? Did you try the hands-on treatment? Especially because with the hands-on treatment, sometimes you can get another therapist see tightness in the calf. So I would say, as long as you got tightness in your calf, you should expect problems with your plantar fascia. Even if you get better and then you still get tightness in the calf, without resolving the tightness, then it's going to predispose you to the problem. Depending on the problem with the hip, sometimes hip problems can make you weight bear more on one side. So a lot of the time when people come to me and they have these problems and it's been unresolved for so long, it's because there's so many other factors. And if the first point of treatment is injection, it was always going to fail. And that's the reality of it. So the good news is you may have not tried everything, you know, and you might just, if you've had injections and gone that far, you might want to, depending on what area you are, give me and Sahu a call. Or if you're too far from us, go and see a physio privately and get the problem sorted out because it sounds
Break
like,
down the tissue. Tissue's got to
yeah,
be broken down, but delicately, because the area there is very sensitive.
yeah,
But that's definitely the case with all them tears in the fascia and the nodules
yeah,
that are created. That stuff has to be unstuck, broken, and remodeled. And that's an
definitely.
uncomfortable process.
It is stretching, what Sahu was saying, spiky ball, rolling, it will help. Remember,
I will resolve the thing if you're gonna do it on your own. Because the thing is, if it's really bad, I'm talking about on that it was severed, it tore properly, or if there's micro tears, that whole healing of the body. All
mm,
right, so I think we are appreciating this Achilles tendon stuff here. So not Achilles, sorry, plantar fascia. And the thing as well with the plantar fascia before we move on, because we're talking about the flat foot stuff, um, especially with black people having a flatter foot. In many cases, when they're measuring our foot, they're measuring it to a different standard. So we have like a functional flat foot, is what I call it. A flat foot, which act like a spring. When there's a flat foot, which doesn't act like a spring. And that flat foot there is quite problematic. So the foot really should be pliant through all the joints as well. So that could have a restriction in that space there. Well, I think I'm going to carry on with the presentation if we're ready to go. I was going to share my screen and see what we can add to this story here. So we can add to this story. Just wake up this reality. So we're just going to look into the lower limb and the alchemical process. So, Christos went quite deep into the general anatomy. So when I get into that aspect of the anatomy, I'm just really going to be connecting the dots together and just trying to have a more of an overview. But before we get there, to understand this body from a more esoteric, internal, a metaphysical, to understand this body from a more magical, mystical perspective, we're going to enter in through the science of polarity. And with polarity, we know positive and negative one term that we utilize with it. We have yin and yang is another term that we utilize for polarity. But when we're looking at that, left side is the body, left side, yin, or feminine, or the past. Right side, masculine, yang, or actually the future. And I generally describe this when I'm going through the body and talking through the psychological aspect of it. Now, when we're looking at the past, we're like past, future. It's not so much, sorry, not past, future, past, present. So it's not so much just past events or past situations or past scenarios. When we're looking at the left side of the body, it's those sequences affecting us in the moment, now, in the present. And then we have right, where we're looking at that stuff that's happening in the future, the anticipation of stuff going on in the future, the concerns, the worries, the fears, all that stuff there that we're projecting out into the future. Present, experiencing it in the present. So I call it future present when I'm generally talking about it with clients. And we're looking at the right side of the body and the left. So when we appreciate this, when we now start to look at some of the emotions that are trapped or caught or held, because the emotions is like energetic fields projected from the mind itself or from the brain. Those frequencies resonate with different parts of the body. Different parts of the body have a certain resonant frequency. They vibrate to a certain degree. So when we're looking at the emotions in the lower limb, we find that we say ego, they ego for the knee. If we were to say ego for the knee, and we're looking at the right, that is looking into the future. So here we're really saying that you have ambitions, desires, but you may feel like you're not supported. You have to do this and you have to go this alone. It's kind of like this kind of thing. If that's the case on that right side, that is perception of the future. So these plans, these desires, you still may go through them, but you just stored the emotional content in your body somewhere. And in this case, in your knee. Depression, interestingly, we can call that in the feet. The pain around the foot. The feet, when we're looking at the feet, we've got this idea that we are, I know the whole limb takes you where you're going, like the whole leg, but the feet, they represent the idea of reaching the promised land, reaching that place your heart desires. So let's say you wake up in the morning and you say to yourself, you want to go to the fishmongers, or you want to go to the what they call that, the farmers market. That's your desire. It's your feet that take you there. But then when we're unable to achieve that, yeah, this can start to have an effect upon the foot. The inability to achieve that which our heart desire through trodding it there. Left side of the foot, then it's like these things have been inhibited from the past. There's been situations that you've encountered that when you wanted to achieve certain things, you was held back. You couldn't actually take those steps. So that's looking at it from an emotional point of view, when we're looking at the lower limb. We have spiritual, emotional, mental, these things kind of overlap. The spiritual aspect would be more looking at things that affect you in your subconscious mind. Things that when you're going through your day in and out of the world and you're reflecting upon certain things, it's like this internal conversation. This is more of the spiritual aspect of things when we're looking at it. And when we're looking at the hips, the upper thigh, the knees, the shin, the ankle, the foot, all of these different parts, again, they have spiritual meaning. things that can actually help you to develop, or things that can actually help you to fall. So the feet, pain or any problem in feet represent you are emotionally standing still or unable to move on. I think that's like what we said a moment ago. Get into that promised land. And I always like look at the promised land as anything that I'm looking to achieve. Going to see a family member, going to Marks and Spencer's, to the shops, going to the park. It's the destination. It's getting to that location. Stiffness of the ankles, painful ankle mean that changes in your life is difficult for you. Ankles representing your balance, your ability to balance and juggle the idea that you've got to get to this promised land. This is the ankle, because it's a supporting mechanism for the process. And mechanically, yeah. So because it's mechanically a supporting process, then we can look at it in this way. The shin problems are fear of the future, not wanting to move ahead. And that functionally, the tibia anterior, that muscle at the front that Christos went through, that muscle there, flexing the foot, pulling it up, that action there propels you forward, creates a heel strike. So your foot can go down, propelling your body forward. This action there. So when we're looking at the lower limb, to be honest, it's like any part of the body, any part of the anatomy. We just look at the mechanism, the function, what it does. We then add another layer to it, and we then look at what this means. So we're looking at what we mean by this is in our journey of life, like a lesson, like a test. This is what we're looking at. So all these different pains and injuries that occur energetically, they're tied to mind, and mind's expressing that there's something that you need to pay attention to, and something you need to work on. Whether it is that your thigh is causing a problem, your hip is a big one, because this is one that I see a lot of people have hip problems, and this is always the same. But I remember when I first was trying to understand these concepts, I would say stuff so indirectly. So with the hips, we're looking at a crossroads in life, whether to go left or to go right. But we can go deeper than this, because in many cases, it's like a spiritual between your upper nature and your lower nature. We're going to touch that in a second, actually. So the hips is an interesting place that gets injured, damaged a lot from falling. There's a lot of lack of acceptance or not wanting to make that choice there. Especially when you get to an older age. Lack of choices, not wanting to do any kind of, join any clubs, do any activities, becoming more sedentary, staying in one location, it's reducing the choices. And choices is a funny thing. Choices is a thing tied to free will, and free will is another illusion. Choices are presented to us, but it seems like there's no true choice, because we just have options that are presented there. The only way we overcome this, all what I'm talking about here, is through the inner journey, through practicing meditation and reflection, contemplation. These are the methods that we use to actually release these energies, understanding the different organs, their tones, their colors, how they vibrate, the positions that you hold yourself in to alleviate these things. Yeah. So we counteract all of this with mind, using polarity, but we understand in order to become effective in the process, we just understand the basic formula, that all of this is based on the basic mechanism of that part of the body, what it does. And that is the area of one's life that we just have to look into and do some additional work in. So we're looking at the different, when we express our emotions, when we feel in happiness, depression, pride, our body temperature shifts, our body radiates more infrared energy or more heat. When we train, when we do internal work or qigong, we start to generate more internal heat. It's interesting which states, emotion actually create less heat in our lower extremities. Because a lot of those other emotional states, they affect the lower limb, but maybe very slight, maybe just around the feet a little bit, just around the legs, around the hips. But these four here are the main ones which actually affect the legs properly. So we know when we're experiencing these sensations, we have to apply the opposite polarity. So when we're feeling depression, we have to seek within us some tranquility, some serenity. When we're experiencing what we call sadness, we just balance that there with some happiness. We have to do something that makes us feel happy. Watch a comedy, go for a walk, go for a jog. Through the way the body works, the neurotransmitters that are secreted, the serotonin, the endorphins that are secreted from the brain, if you go take a run, it's hard to maintain sadness in that state. To run and cry for 15, 20 minutes, you have to be extremely stubborn, I would say. And then that's a trait you're going to have to work through. That's another thing then. So different emotional states, change in body temperature. Once we acknowledge these different states we're in, then we have to apply some form of opposition to the force, counterbalance that. And this knowledge is known from the old world, and they had a slight different approach from the offset. Knowing that the legs represent something that is of an earthly nature, representing an earthly force, the material world, the mundane reality, the stuff that that our ego, the stuff that our character gets lost into, the thing that we cultivate in our internal being, the things we're trying to develop out of, or refine, or monitor. Sometimes we're just trying to monitor a bad behavior. So we're looking support when we're going through this process. So in the old world, a deity representing a particular strength will be used by the legs as support, representing that aspect of that being, or should I say, they've overcome that aspect of their consciousness, the lower aspect of their consciousness. And we're going to see that, why that's important in a few moments. So in ancient Kemet, Amun-Ra, when Amun and Ra become one, is representing the legs. And we can say, wow, this must be like left and right leg. But Amun-Ra in ancient Kemet was the being representing, and you know it's two beings in one. And Amun-Ra one main thing in his story. There's a lot to say about Amun-Ra, but there's one main thing. Apophis, Apep, or the snake deity, or the great mother. This snake, this serpent, the slaying of the serpent. So Amun-Ra is all about slaying the serpent, or Apophis. This serpent representing, again, the earthly realm, or the material things, the stuff inside your nature you're trying to overcome. So these two deities become one, showing the slaying of the serpent. The serpent is dwelling in the sacrum. You have to nurture the sacrum in order for the seed to rise back up. In the sacrum area, sorry, I should say it this way. You have to nurture the sacrum area so then the resurrection of the seed can take place. Because when the original seed that circle around, that enters into the sacrum, is destroyed. It's actually, yeah, united in that cedar of the cordis equina. Cordis equina, representing the serpent or the kundalini that wraps 3 times round and a quarter. So Apophis basically had to overcome this, and then we have later on other deities representing the same concept. So the fire, the order of the fire in the old world was connected to Draco, and this draconian nature. So this is all energy connected to the legs. When legs are unbalanced, this draconian nature, this desire to do that which you want to do, no matter what somebody else wants, it doesn't really matter. Just do your thing. So yeah, Draco, this draconian nature, same thing going on there. But at a time it ruled. This is the old world. The reptilians that they speak of, this is when we're talking about the great procession of 26,000 years, 2,100 years, one age. This procession that we're observing here, that is for the 12. Then we have a greater procession, which is of the 7 kings, which is within. At the moment, Big Dipper is the center of the heavens. And this cycle is like 3,600, because it's still within this, you just got to divide 7 by 26,000. Some constellations are a little bit longer, so they rule a little bit longer. Draconians, the serpent, the great mother, this constellation, when it ruled the heavens, it lasts for a long time. And the concern is that they say when this constellation has ruled in the past, a lot of wickedness takes place on Earth. But this cycle, that's within another cycle of what we say the 2000. So we're in the age of Aquarius right now. Let me just go off on this for a moment. We're in the age of Aquarius, Pisces. We're at the threshold between the two. That cycle is like a 2,100 year process. 100 years or so for the crossover. So we're like in the early energetic phase of Aquarian energy. Who ruled? The king that ruled over that, or the constellation that rules over this, that sits in the center of heaven, is the Big Dipper. Sorry, I should call it the Little Dipper. Uranus Minor, because it's Polaris that sits in the center of the heavens. But that rules and sends down radiant light energy for a period of 3,000 odd years. And that's the ruling over the constellation of Aquarius. So Draco, This is important because when we're looking at mythology, that draconian energy, that dragon energy, the dragon energy, that serpentine energy is connected to the Titans or to old gods. But the old gods always get taken over because we're talking about astronomy, or should we call it astrotheology, is what we're actually describing here. Astrotheology, the way in which the stars have an effect on the human being, how the stars are telling us beings on earth our story. We put them in the heavens because certain qualities and personalities aren't changing. This is why they're put in the heavens. Saturn representing father time, or judgment, or life lessons, death and resurrection, going through a process of rebirth through trial and error. Through trial and error. And so those beings there, those beings there were taken over. So you know everything just as time go on. Another pantheon come along and we just tell the same story again. So we have Zeus that comes along and takes over from Kronos. And we have now Zeus and Odin, because we are well aware, I'm hoping here, Odin's story, Odin connecting with the god of thunder, which is Thor, and Loki. Odin's story is beautiful. And then Zeus, connected with the Hades of the underworld and Poseidon of the water. So these two characters here, when you go into their story, there's something that's very clear, that both self-centered, both selfish, and both can't control that which stand between their legs. This is clear, these two characters. They have children everywhere. Zeus is, I don't know which one's worse. Zeus, like the story of Aquarius, it's only because Zeus as he's flying over, you see Aquarius tending to sheep, that he sees attractiveness. He feels for him. So he takes him, has his way, and then shares him amongst the gods. Because of that, then Aquarius is put into the stars. Seems like he never went against that whole process there. That's why they say in the time of Aquarius, there seems to be only things going on. But that's why basically Zeus is this kind of character. And Odin ain't no different. Don't really know too many stories of Odin mixing with boys, actually. But Odin, yeah, when he go through Midgard or when he go through Earth, yeah, he's the same thing. He's got children. Yeah. So we got the same idea and concept going on here. The control of this, whether you're male or female. It's this sexual desire. It's these wants, these needs that we feel that we have to obtain. Another energy connected to the legs is Sagittarius, because we put that into the heavens as well. We put into the heavens different body parts because the body parts are important. And they tell a story just to make us understand why it's important. The senator representing the legs. And it's interesting because with different body types, when you know their date of birth, there's generally a correspondence. Sagittarius people generally will have like bigger legs, and I mean bigger thigh area. Sometimes bigger lower leg, sorry. But it's interesting how it corresponds. But then there's a connection with that. The same idea of a spear or a shooting of an arrow that's coming back from Amun, Amun-Ra with Apophis. So he's the archer for a reason. Traits being charming, adventurous, independent, blunt, impatient, and impulsive. All traits of Odin and Zeus. Amun-Ra's story don't really show him following that path there, even though he had the ability to. There's more of a scenario where he just left the gods to do their thing and withered and turned to silver. His bones, Amun-Ra, bones turned to silver. There's one mythology where it describes this air. And then those bones of Amun-Ra were used, that silver dust, to make humans. Wow. When we observe this kind of stuff here, we understand something deeper. But Sagittarius energy is connected to the lower limb. So Christos broke down our nerve supply, which is going into this main sciatic nerve, which is connected to Odin, which is this wandering nerve that end up in the foot. If I come through Midgard though, if I come through from the earth, through the sacrum, and then up through the spine, through Yggdrasil, all the way up to where Asgard dwell, or up into the pineal gland. All this stuff there, it all connects because it's important. That's why when we're talking about whether you're unhealthy, healthy, whether you've got pain, low degree, high degree, whether you're feeling blissed out, then you have to do different things. Or whether you're feeling extremely depressed, we have to stimulate the body to cause the electrons and the nerves to flow, because we have veins, artery, and nerves. So where we see a vein, there's an artery and there's a nerve. So we've got blood flow. Blood itself constitutes the body, the constitution of the body, the brain itself, our thoughts, our thinking, and our actions. So all these things are so important. Even when we have a high degree of pain, then we do low-level work. That's why Qigong is so effective. And loads of research has been found that Qigong, when you have cancer, depending on doesn't matter what stage, Qigong is going to help to alleviate some degree of discomfort, whether it's through holding posture or breathing, whether you're sitting in that or lying in the bed. And I've observed this as well, working in St. Paul's Hospital, working in the oncology department, where I worked a couple of years doing therapy work. And also when I got an opportunity to do a few other techniques. So, if a person is willing, and if you have the knowledge, then let's see what takes place. So we have an energetic flow that we're observing from our legs. And that energetic flow we're observing from our legs, same nerve, same muscle, same thing that we discussed earlier on, is contracting that flow there. This is looking at it from a yogic perspective, but they all come together because we've got this kundalini down here that we need to just rise up. But it's stuck in the ordinary person. When it starts to move, the energy flows down the legs, up the legs, down the arms, up the arms. And that's a practice that you can stimulate, you can work on through practicing Qigong training or yogic training. But when we're looking at it from Qigong point of view, we're looking at the extraordinary vessels. And there are basically the yang linking, the yin linking, the yang heel, and the yin heel, 4 vessels. One on the outside, one on the inside, both legs. And then we have one that's more internal, is thrusting, which connects to our hip flexor, our iliopsoas internally. But when we're looking at it from Qigong, because we have the option of the 12 meridians, but these are more looking at connection to organs and energetic flow in that sense then. The extraordinary vessels, they feed the 12 meridians. So when you're doing your Qigong work or you're doing certain postures, we're stimulating these pathways, and these pathways are the ones that are feeding the 12 meridians. Go to the source. So these are the main ones that we're looking at here, which travel on the outside of the leg, around the hill. So this is why when we're creating our first arch on the lower part of our body, we're looking at the idea of pressing down with the big toe and bringing the heels together. When we're doing this, we're stimulating these particular channels here. Main thing we're looking at is some concentric and eccentric contractions. That's what we're looking at. So if we're doing a static posture, we are isometrically contracting. But if we're doing some kind of movement, slow, rhythmic kind of movement, then we're going through the lengthening and the shortening phase of muscle contraction. And this is what helps to strengthen the muscle. The bonus though, which I didn't put down, but the bonus is the isometric contractions, which is the stillness. The stillness. This stillness here, I say that a few times on purpose because the stillness, the static postures, have saved many a people's life. I know many people, their life have been saved from practicing standing still with different conditions, different ailments. And standing, and it goes through a whole different metaphysical process. And it's so deep standing, this goes back, beginning of humanity, no matter what stage we've been in, we've had to stand up and sit down. But when we've had to stand up, depending upon what stage, we've had to stand and be still, observe and watch, wait. And this is in our DNA, this part of our journey, whether we're watching an animal, whether we're waiting for a predator to pass by, whatever it is. We've had to do a whole heap of standing still and waiting, being delicate on that ground there because other animals can hear. Tapping back into that is what we're really looking to do. And this reactivates our DNA. This is why when we get to a certain level, when we're talking about this, we're talking about basic here, if I fling it way out there and we go to the other extreme, to high level practitioner, it can become a human becoming an animal, a human animal. Well, we're animals, but let's say now a human that's become a proper animal. And I don't mean animal as in vicious, in the sense of how you may perceive the perception because of how we're just being trained to think what an animal means. But an animal is a being that's totally in as one with nature. It's not other than a domesticated animal. Yeah, we take away from nature, and even they still do better than human beings. But then when you get to the other extreme, because you got tapped so much into earth energy, into the earth energy, for utilizing these practices there, then there's this instinct, this connection to nature, things around you that develops. You have awareness, which is keeps you one step ahead of everything around you. So I'm going to go through this section swiftly as I observe where I am. And so we're connecting the dots. Connecting the dots now. So we have our muscles that they're like lines of contraction. These muscles here, nothing's working independently or on its own. Everything's working as a group. Everything's working here. Even within a muscle, they're contracting rhythmically at different times. The synchronicity is so beautiful because it's in relation to other rhythms with parallel or adjacent or lateral muscles. So we have something called anatomy train that just connects the dots. And these are the major trains from the leg, but they cross up into the upper body. Not really going to touch the upper body. So we have something called a functional line, and that is similar to what we're looking at this thrusting vessel. So when we're doing pelvic floor strengthening work activity, or when we're doing movements that require us to cross diagonally across our body, like throwing a javelin, throwing a ball, these are considered yeah. These are considered those activities there. Then we have the deep front line. Again, the adductors, the internal hip flexor, iliopsoas, psoas, quadratus lumborum. Then we're going higher up. But these deep ones here again, these deep muscles here, all connect and go all the way up the neck, all to the head. So if you're going to dissect the body, you can make this connect all the way. Therefore, upper body strengthening can tonify lower body, and lower body can tonify upper, but then weakness in the lower can create an instability in the upper. But everything's just connected. It's not like just the muscle next to it is going to be affected and you need to strengthen that muscle there. You may have to strengthen a muscle that's 20 centimeters away because of the way the fascial connections work, like the foot. Just like the foot. So the foot itself, you can have issue in the calf, and the plantar fascia is that's like a good 15 centimeters, depending upon your leg length. So everything's connected. And this is controlled by the internal or external rotators. And we've gone through that very well. So we have something here called the first bow. We're looking to stabilize the lower limb, and that's activating the heels and the foot, which contracts the internal aspect of the legs. When we're doing this, it contracts the groin as well. In a deep stance like this, it can be done, and it can also be done standing. The same idea, where you are activating your inner leg. You be standing at a bus stop, you be waiting in a queue, and you just do the same technique. You just place your foot down firm, you throw your toes in your shoe, spread them out, press down with your big toe, feel the arch activate all the way to your heel, and then make your two heels move together. And in that sensation there's an activation, a stabilizing. Sometimes we're just standing and no contraction, bum doing way too much work. This deep back line here, a bit of the sciatic nerve is connected to this one as it goes through the hamstring into the calf. But with the back of the leg, you've got one important thing here, the second heart, what the lower limb works on, and that is with the calf muscles. When the calf muscles pump, they squeeze the vein, sorry, which allows for the valve to open up and for the blood to flow. So without this action here, we have extremely reduced blood flow returning back up. So a lot of people have cold foot. Tension within the calf muscle because of the squeezing, the constant squeeze, and therefore the blocking of the flow, reducing the flow. Once you loosen up the muscles down there, then there can be a contracting and a relaxing, and there can be a pumping action. So something like bouncing on your toes helps to activate. 1 minute bouncing on your toes. 1 minute bouncing, and your heel is only coming up a centimeter, or you can just slide a paper underneath, or you can do it a bit higher. Very effective way to resolve this. this issue of poor circulation, but also you have to do some soft tissue work, see a therapist or somebody to soften up the muscle there. And what is very important when it comes to the feet, we call it bubbling spring. That's why we have to do so much work on this plantar fascia in Qigong. It's important because the energy come up from the earth, and this space here where the dot is related to energy feeding our kidneys, traveling up our legs. And that's what we call Jing, vitality. So our vitality comes up through this well as we connect to the earth. We're practicing our internal works. So walking barefoot helps to stimulate more electric or electron flow up through the body, ultimately stimulating the kidneys, creating more vitality in the body. Because the problem is vitality, it come and go, but we don't know how to hold on to it. The energy flows through us every moment, just like now. But because we don't know how to hold on to it, it has come in and it gone, and it leave us in the same sick state. But right now in this moment, this same energy, this vitality is flowing through us, but we've got to capture it. So to capture it, we have to give it a welcoming place, a lovely welcoming place, a place to dwell in. So we've got this superficial front line, which deals with quadricep, connects to the rectus abdominis all the way up to the neck. From the neck, rectus abdominis, the quadriceps, the tibia, the shin muscle there, and onto the top of the foot. This is all superficial connection. So if there's a trouble there in the quadricep, we can look at the sternum, sternocleidomastoid. And many a time I've observed this. Same with the tibia anterior. Most of the time we're looking at the opposite side of the same leg. But you've got two more, I believe. This spiral line coming from the leg, used a lot when we're doing spiraling, rotating motions. The way it crosses through, it connects in this fashion here. It's mainly we have belt meridian, Dharmo, which represents the same spiral, but they're spiraling around the body. So when we do movement, it's like it's spiraling and keeping this torque stuff going on back and front of the leg. There's this little spiral going on between the two. Even when you squat or take a walk, the spiral line is constant. So we utilize it again in Qigong. We use this concept of screwing into the earth, which is press the big toe down, spread out the toes, and rotate your heel in. And the lateral line, which is similar to this yang linking and yang heel, which are both lateral lines, but the other two lines are medial, internal. But they go all the way up to the head, same way. So just a brief one. So those extraordinary vessels documented, let's say, it's hard to denote actually, because when you're looking at old texts, 1700s, 1600s, you find older texts that go back to, it's like 800 AD. But then this stuff here, I assume coming back further, it just wasn't written down the same way. And those texts there, I believe they will be extremely expensive anyway to get some of those ancient texts that are expressing some of these simple meridian channels in the old time. But we can see that there's a connection with this lateral line and the two lines that we're trying to work. Okay, everybody. That was just a quick run through the muscle connections. Because when we're connecting the dots, because we spoke a lot about all these independent stuff, we have to understand that it's a line, it's a channel, and that channel with contraction, expansion, with squeezing, which would be a static posture or with slow movement, help you to create the right voltage. Once one's created the correct voltage in the body, which is this 0.50, 0.25 millivolts, we're on this kind of level here. We can create this through our internal works. Feel like a calmness coming over you, and it stimulates a whole heap of other neuroactivity. But we can do this. And the legs, they offer us the opportunity to just generate more energy. Because you can do this stuff without legs. I would think say to the ability to slay the serpent, the dragon, you require legs to achieve that. But legs of the mind need to be overcome in order to be successful. So if there's any questions on this emotional aspect of the journey, so that's what it come like. We just talk about the emotional side of things and how different anatomy structures affect us in our journey.
Yeah, no, thank you, Sahu, for that wonderful presentation. Yeah, the story gets more and more interesting and deep as you go more and more into it, you know. But yeah, the legs are, yeah, it's a big storehouse.
Big
It's a
one.
big powerhouse, and yeah, so much, you know, even around that whole lower Tantien region, the glutes and that, you know, when you're looking at any power lifter, they appreciate the size, the strength, and even just the whole energy storage capacity of the glute muscles. You know, when you look at the, you know, especially the black woman, you know, again, there's so much, you know, coming from the hips. There's so much power, you know, the baby will sit on the hips, or, you know, the whole of the fat storage being around the area, you know, energetically, yeah, just giving them energy for whatever work they need to do. You know, when we look at, you know, the whole Tai Chi, all the power, the martial arts, all of that coming from the hip region, the legs, how our legs connect to the ground. There's so many aspects of the legs, you know, which is very important metaphysically from everything that's happening on the energetic point of view. But yeah, no, it's really interesting, really interesting.
The connections energetically to the legs. Where they take us? Where will they be taking us next on this journey? All I know with the legs, emotionally, energetically. Now, once we can balance all these earthly desires, earthly desires. It's funny, isn't it? We have a bad diet because of whatever choice that we make, and it affects our joints. And then you end up having swollen joints because of the choice of food that we eat. But the choice of food we ate because of our experience in the world. Then when we learn now to not have such an emotional attachment to events in the world, let's say we change our eating habit, and then that same stuff that's stored in our knee or in our joints is no longer happening. But we don't even realize this in most cases.
Yeah, yeah.
You missed that one there.
Yeah, because even problems, we get a lot of, you know, when we're looking at all the bad food choices, how the body safely stores it, you know, in a part of our body that can deal with it the best, you know.
Right. Mm. So any questions there, anybody, before we leave everybody? Because
Yeah,
we
great
are,
presentation, Sahu.
yes,
Yeah,
sir.
very interesting. I'd like to focus on what you call the 12 meridians. Yeah. Because I take it there's lots of meridians, but are these 12 the main meridians that connect the pressure points through the body?
Well, you got the 8 extraordinary, and then you have the 12 meridians. And the 12 meridians, we're looking at what is called like the conception, governing. I'm going to come back to those two. But you have, let's say, kidney, liver, large intestines, spleen, the triple burner or the triple warmer. You got those make up what we call the 12 meridians.
Mhm.
But then we have these 8 extraordinary vessels. Extraordinary because they be the reservoirs. But those reservoirs, they say when you train and tonify them, those are the pathways that allows humans to achieve and do magical things. That's why they're called extraordinary. They're once you tap into them, and these reservoirs are full and they're expanded. Perception, clairvoyance, and all this other stuff there, all this other stuff, depend upon your makeup, start to materialize. That's through working with the 8, the extraordinary. But most people don't talk about them. And then most acupuncturists, it's only the old system where they use the extraordinary. So that would be found in the Yellow Emperor as well. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. Clearly, Yellow Emperor is 2,000 years ago, one of the oldest texts. And it has it mentioned in there. So we have the 12, the 8, I would say, from an internal point, that's our focus.
And it's interesting because, when we go through this paradigm of knowledge, it's like the ones that seem to know the most from an information point of view are the ones that seem to be able to do less. And the ones that seem to know less in the sense of information regurgitation are the ones that seem to be able to do more.
Why you say that?
Well, I mean, in regards to when you're talking about the extraordinary vessels, um, sometimes how you get different characters, whether it's in these kind of mythological films and these heroes they seem to be what people might say, not very bright, but they seem to be very, have a strong determination and self-belief.
Yes.
And they have a kind of character where they believe that everything is possible and there's no limitation, and they won't know the science of things. They won't their head is not in their own way. And then you've got all our professors, our lecturers, and all that you can mention the simplest, most logical thing to them, but if it's not in their narrative,
Yeah.
they automatically dismiss it.
Reject it.
And yeah, in regards to, a lot of these things, once you kind of go through a process of being open-minded, that's when you kind of start to realize the power, the latent power that are, the expanding things kind of reveal to you. And that's why I think it's so important to be in practices like Tai Chi,
That's right.
because all the time you're always learning something new. You could be doing the same move 1,000 times and it will be the 1,001 time that you you actually start to get it
It's true. It's true.
and see the parallel, you
It's
know.
amazing. What you say there, that is true. I've done certain moves for years, the same move. In the beginning, I'd be like to myself, wow, that don't even make too much sense. And then after a while,
Mm,
I'm like, okay, then I think I understand now. And then now I'm like, okay,
mm.
I understand. It's like you can only refine something if you do the same thing. It's really
Yes,
challenging to
yes.
refine something and observe like like in a scientific way your development over time when you're constantly shifting and changing.
Mm,
Like you need to just focus on one thing and watch that affect everything else. One form,
hmm.
you practice one movement and that affect every aspect of your life because you will just do
Yeah, yeah,
one thing again and again and again and again.
yeah, yeah. And even looking at one of the slides where you showed the Kundalini expanding, and it looked like the energy was going to the pineal gland and
Yeah,
kind of raining. It looked like it was raining down back to the lower legs,
that's
you
right.
know.
Yes,
And there was a uh, something on the diagram which said immortality being achieved. And what's so interesting even about this, especially in this Western hemisphere, and immortality is, the first thing when you're losing energy of the body through whatever way, through whatever's happening. Like, for example, I think it was on the Saturday where I was just working and, I forgot to eat.
Mm.
Literally, it was coming to the 4 o'clock and I forgot to eat. And I started feeling a little bit dizzy.
mm.
And,
It catch
it
up.
was really hot weather. I didn't even drink anything much on that day. And where's the first thing you start to feel the problem? In the legs.
Your legs start to feel weak.
Yeah.
Can't hold it no
And
more.
yeah. And even, when you're looking at the legs, when you're looking at the power, the glutes, and all of these things, you can see that it's a storehouse for energy.
Yeah.
And the people that seem to be living the longest, there seems to be something going on with their legs.
Because you
They
know what you
seem
was
to be.
giving that example earlier on about the
Mhm.
same thing. I remember same with those elders that live in Tibet in the mountains,
Uh,
living to
yeah.
120, 100, over 100 because of their calf muscle.
Mm,
And
mm.
up them hills every day, all their life. They die in good
Okay.
health. Imagine you die in good health.
Yeah, yeah. It's and almost like they they was in command, rather than the ailments or whatever. And
Yeah.
then you wonder, with this immortality, are people achieving immortality, but deciding to go at a certain time? Because I mean, how long can you, if immortality was there for everyone,
Ah, oops, sorry.
would it be 120 years before people go, actually, I've really had enough of this earth
You're gonna have
and
to let
decide,
go. You're gonna have to let go of some basic things, if you want to live that long.
hmm,
There's some serious things you're gonna have to let go of. Because even when because it's just a weird one, isn't it? If such a thing is possible, live forever. There's
yeah,
been a few stories, a few accounts of people that have been immortal or who have disappeared, reappear, and look relatively the same age, maybe 100.
hmm,
Count Saint Germain is one of them in the modern era. Count Saint Germain said to have been immortal, and when he sat amongst the court people then and told stories of a period of time, maybe 100 years ago, they said that he's told the story like he was there. He could have been just a good storyteller, but it was
hmm,
There's some other character as well. Falconelli. I think he probably is the most recent. Falconelli. They say he's immortal, but with him, they say he went through this mixing of the male and female, became a hermaphrodite, could change from man to woman, and started to regress and look younger. But that account is only based upon his student, who when he was a child saw him, and then saw him again when he was an old man, and swear blind this is him. So because of that 50-year, whatever it was, space between, that's how he come to this conclusion that this man's immortal. And there's been
I
some other
see.
people, because I did investigate this thing, trying to understand, because the life of a yogi, last one. The life of a yogi, the book is called The Life of a Yogi. It talks of same kind of thing, immortality, and certain glands in the body, appendix being one of the important ones. Appendix. Yeah. So they say when you look a certain age, it's like these organs come online. Your appendix comes online when you're in your like 70, 80, when you're starting to get that age stage, and it starts to produce some neurotransmitters according to the yogis.
I see.
And this is what helps you to live forever, or for a longer time, Christos.
Yeah, well, even you have people like Hilton Hotema in one of his books describing about people who get grey hair, but then when they start to live up to 110 or all them ages, how the hair color reverses back to black. So
I like that one there.
yeah, it
I
is
like that
really,
one.
really interesting.
That's a good one. Well, everybody, I think we're going to finish up this evening. So, we be endless at this moment there. As there's no questions, I think we're going to return back in 2 weeks, because we're going to be back. We're going to be back in order. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful evening, wonderful morning, wonderful day, wherever you are in the world,